Hello and welcome back to the channel, and I wanted to just make this video because I was doing some reminiscing, and I think the PlayStation 1 is probably my favorite console of all time. Might not be my most played anymore, but certainly my most fondest memories come from the original PlayStation. And I was just thinking, what games really strike me as being kind of blown away games, not just cinematically, but gameplay wise right from the start. Thinking back previously, this was a big leap forward from the SNES to the PlayStation, effectively, or Mega Drive to the PlayStation. I know there's the N64 as well, but the PlayStation really was a big leap forward for 3D gaming. And I wanted to just make this video because some games are pretty obvious when you think about introductions. You've got the early Tomb Raider games. They are pretty synonymous for the introductions and the cinematic vibe to them. Other obvious ones, such as Resident Evil, all three Resident Evils are pretty epic, especially at the start of the games, as well as Metal Gear Solid, one of the classics of all time in terms of scope and drama and just classic cinematography right from the start. A huge epic game and of course introduction. So we're not going to be looking at those games. Of course there are some other ones like all your RPGs that are on the PlayStation, your Final Fantasies and such. They're just epic in scope just by definition of being an RPG. So we're not going to look at those. We're going to look at some forgotten classics, and we're going to jump you through 5 gems that I think are really awesome right from the get-go. And hopefully you'll enjoy this trip down memory lane, and maybe you'll find a couple of games that you hadn't thought about previously. Okay, first one here is probably one that I get the most flack for because it is very well known, of course, Silent Hill. Now, it is well known, but this original game is quite forgotten in my eyes. We've just had a remake of Silent Hill 2, and they've just skipped the original Silent Hill. So whilst people recognize it, I think a lot of people probably think of Silent Hill and just think, oh, the first game, you know, it's very early and dated and doesn't actually run that well, which is completely wrong. And actually the main reason why I wanted to make this video, because I tried playing Silent Hill because of the remake of Silent Hill 2, and I realized, oh crap, I've never really played this game very much. And it is absolutely epic in terms of the introduction. There's so much suspense and drama and cinematography that it's just, I just couldn't believe it, because I was one of those people that just thought, oh, this is an old game, it's a bit clunky, tank controls, etc. So the game starts out, and we do skip the intro movie, it's pretty convoluted, but you wake up, as you've seen, in a car crash, you've lost your daughter. Of course, you've got that snowy, foggy, ashy visual effect going on. You run around a corner, you find your daughter, she runs off, you go and chase her, and that is really where the game begins. So already you've got that atmosphere, you've got that suspense going. You travel down this big city or town, and then you go down this corridor alleyway, and it's all very creepy, mostly driven by the absolutely amazing and beautiful sound effects that really add to the tense, eerie feel to this game. In fact, I would go as far as saying the sound effects are more important than the amazing visuals. So you make your way down the alleyway, through a gate, following your daughter still, and you come across your first bit of gore. As you're panting for breath, there's a dead something on the ground. You continue walking through the corridor, and this is where the camera starts to zoom and twist and really build some eerie suspense in the air. Continuing on a little bit further, and you start to hear this thud in the background that really starts to drive your nerves up. All of a sudden the lights go out and it starts to get dark. You light a match and it's all you've got, but it drives some really suspense through shadows that have been created. And whilst we're playing in 4K here, you played this back in the day on like 480p, the visuals being so decreased just added to the suspense. Continuing through, now we're starting to see some gore. The music really starts to pick up and heighten your senses even further than they already were. And at this point, you're really on edge. You come across something else dead on the floor, but so much more blood and gore everywhere. And then all of a sudden, boof.
What's going on?
See this completely tortured soul, and you are terrified as a child at this point, maybe even as an adult. You inspect it and turn around and boom, two creatures come out and attack you. You've got no weapons, no form of defense, and all of a sudden you are dead. Of course, that's not how the game ends. You wake up, you're in a coffee shop or a cafe, and it was all a nightmare. Or was it? So there we go. One of the best introductions in gaming still today, I think. It was absolutely amazing replaying this recently. And just as a side note, actually, this game was still fantastic just to play through. I don't really know why they made Silent Hill 2 as a remake and not this first one first, because it plays really well. Anyway, on to our next game here, which is Heart of Darkness. This one is the definition of a forgotten classic. So you start off the game, and this is actually more about the introduction sequence rather than the gameplay, in all honesty. It's all an FMV, so the visuals are a bit iffy by today's standards, but back in the day, in the late 90s, this was pretty epic, and I would have watched something like this on TV had it been actually produced in episode content. So your character wakes up in class, he's been sleeping. To avoid being locked in this little cupboard at the back of the classroom, the boy bolts out on the bell and avoids detention. Epic jump down the stairs here and is reunited with his dog, who's obviously amazing even in this very strange cartoon form. Whack a cap on him and off you go. Now this is not Disney standard cartoon drawing, and especially at the resolution being 480p or whatever it is, but if you had this remade today, I think some kids would probably still watch it. So chilling up on the hillside here, all of a sudden something strange happens in the sky. An eclipse forms over the sun, your dog starts barking, and we get the sense that something very evil is happening. As the sky starts to twist, you zoom back in on your character screaming, and it's very apparent that your dog has just been kidnapped. Cut to your boy starting to cry and runs home. Now, when your boy gets home, he has the most elaborate, crazy treehouse setup ever. This is some kind of Dexter's Lab type stuff. Pushes a few buttons on his old-fashioned computer, and all of a sudden you've got some kind of pod racer out of Star Wars here, and away we go. Flying up through the sky, I don't know how, but we end up in some kind of alien planet. The flying doesn't last long though, because we very quickly crash into a cavern on the planet and are essentially stuck in the rocks, and this is where the gameplay then kicks in. Now gameplay wise, this is probably one of the hardest games on the PlayStation. I beat it a few times, but it's pretty much just trial and error. You can see here after you make the first jump that actually this shadow in the background that you don't really even notice scares you, knocks you down to your death, and you have to restart straight from the get-go. So it's basically every screen that you come across, trial and error, figure out what you're actually supposed to do. And it's not too long before you're completely overrun by these creatures. And yeah, this is pretty much the game. A puzzle game of sorts, but also action-adventure, trial and error, as I said. It's pretty epic, and I definitely recommend it. But you do have to have a lot of patience and creativity to figure out how you get through each little page of the game. Okay, next game here, Nightmare Creatures. Again, jumping straight into this one. There is an FMV sequence if you don't press anything as the game's booting, but as a child, almost everybody does. So you are met with your character introduction screen right from the start, don't really know what's going on here, and you jump straight into this big open world as either one of the two characters, male or female, and straight away you're met by this zombie-looking thing that you can slice in half, as you've seen there. You expand a little bit further, and you're met by this werewolf jumping out of the side door, and this thing takes a lot of hits for the second enemy in the game. Luckily, you notice you have a pistol, and you can pop his head off. And to be honest with you, this game is just all about the atmosphere, the visuals, and just how awesomely dark it is. It is basically the first game I noticed as a survival type horror game where the enemies are super fast, probably even faster than you can move because of tank controls. Obviously, Resident Evil and some other horror games came out much before this. I think this actually came out just over a year after Resident Evil. But in my eyes, this is the first horror game that was actually super fast. Now, as I said, there was an FMV sequence, and if you could see that, it does build in a story about the Brotherhood being in a cult and trying to turn themselves into superhumans, but things go bad and these monsters come out. But I just think if you skip that, like most people do, you're thrown into this world. And actually, this is like a precursor to the Dark Souls games, just in terms of how fast things play, the movement, and such. And it's just really awesome. Now, the first level here isn't actually that long. You go through the streets a little bit and then into a foresty, wooded area. Take on some monsters. The monster design is what's really key here because it helps with that atmosphere. Things just look so grand and epic back in the 1800s London. And yeah, it's just a perfect kind of introduction to a game, I think. It's just full of action, a lot of scary jump scares, a lot of scary moments, and just a really well put together introduction level. Now, the rest of the game, it kind of goes downhill slightly because the camera's very well, it has a lot of issues as early PlayStation games do, and it's just a shame though because this introduction level was just so well done that I thought this game could have been epic in scope, and it never really got to that level. Now, there is a sequel. I haven't played it that much. I think it's more of the same. Sadly, a third game got cancelled in development, so this franchise seems to be dead, but it's basically Bloodborne now if you think about it. And oh yeah, that franchise is also pretty much dead. So we could really do with another game similar to this coming out in the modern era. Okay, another one here that everyone actually does know the franchise, of course. It's one of the biggest things in movies and just media in general. However, a lot of people kind of forget about this game. I think, a few people do bring it up from time to time about old action adventure games, but it's actually a perfect introduction to a game, I think. Now, I'm not going to go in. There is a FMV sequence which is just clips out of the movie. That was pretty epic at the time because as a kid, you didn't really have a chance to look at these movies after they were in the cinema until they came out on VHS. Which took quite a long time back in the day. But anyway, we get into the game and you're Buzz Lightyear, you're in Andy's room. This is exactly what you dream about as a kid watching the movies. You want to be in the movie, and essentially that is what you are here in this game. You're Buzz in Andy's room, in Andy's house actually, exploring things. There's several different objectives on each level. The first one here is nice and easy to get around. They do get quite difficult towards the back end of the game, but it's just a perfect introduction to the game and just what kids really wanted to do, probably even adults, to be honest with you. Now, the cool thing about this is also the objectives are given to you by your colleagues, by your friends, the other toys. You've got Mr. Potato Head, you've got Bo Peep, you've got Rex, and you've got the RC car. You have to race him around the garage. It's just a really fun, really amazing way to get you into a game, and it's just something, after watching the film, if you could go back and play this, which is exactly how I experienced it, you were kind of blown away. I mean, this is one of my favorite games on the system as a kid, and by the time this film came out I was probably 11 or 12, and that's kind of slightly older than what the film was probably targeting, but it was just really epic. Anyway, next game.
To infinity and beyond!
Okay, the next game here, we're keeping with that younger demographic. It's the original Spider-Man game. There were two on the PlayStation. This is the first one that came out, and it was really epic at the time. Now, the game does start with an FMV, however, it's rendered in real-time graphics, which is quite rare for this day and age of gaming. But skipping that, the actual game starts and you're welcomed with an introduction by
Spider-Man co-creator Stan Lee here.
which is pretty epic if you ask me. As the introduction is being spoken to you, you fly around this huge open world, which for the time felt huge anyway. It was very open and expansive, and it's not too long after that, you actually take control of Spider-Man and you can fly through this world going in pretty much any direction you want. Now, there is a single path to take to your objective, but it felt like you had the freedom to travel all over New York City, which was just really epic at the time. Soon after, you find your first enemies and you actually feel like Spider-Man. For the first time in video games, you actually felt like you had all the Spidey moves. You could sling webs at people, you could fly around, as I've said, and it would just really felt like you were in one of the comic books or you were on the Saturday morning cartoon. And it was just the first time, as I say, that you felt like Spider-Man in a video game. Of course, it was not the first Spider-Man game, but it's the first one that was done really, really well. Everyone these days just seems to talk about the PlayStation 4 version of Spider-Man that then got released on PS5 and PC, of course. And this one just flies under the radar now. Now, is it as good as those? Obviously not. Technology has moved so far forward that the new games are just going to make you feel like a superhero. But for PlayStation 1 standards, there was nothing else quite like this game if you wanted that Marvel superhero feel. Funny fact is that I believe this game was actually built off of the Tony Hawk's franchise engine, which, when you think about the two genres of game, is really crazy. And that's why Spider-Man is actually a special character in Tony Hawk's 2. Anyway, these were 5 games that I just had a lot of nostalgia for, and I thought their opening sequences, whether it be the movies, the FMVs, or the actual gameplay, were just absolutely perfect. These days in gaming, you often have to play like 10, 20, 30 minutes before you're actually able to get into the game and get invested in the game. But with these old games, they've just done so well in getting you into the game and making you feel like you were playing something epic. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Hit that subscribe button if you have. Leave me a comment of some other games that you think have flown under the radar that have awesome introductions, and I will catch you in the next video.